I'm back again, and this week, it's something that I was not expecting. Here's Horizon Zero Dawn on PC. For a whole lot more videos like this one, check out our channel, give us a like, and subscribe. That's right, this is Horizon Zero Dawn on PC, and with it comes a lot of improvements that were not around in the first game. Now this has a ultra widescreen support, it has something called dynamic foliage to increase the amount of, foliage on the screen if your system can handle it, and it also has the Frozen Wild expansion paired with it. I think there's a couple other tweaks here and there to the game, but I have to preface this by saying that I'm not super familiar with this game. Being an Xbox fan, and devoutly so, I kinda looked at Horizon Zero Dawn as Assassin's Creed Robot Future Past. Now, I'm not throwing any shade against Assassin's Creed, I actually really enjoy those games, but let me tell you, this one is a lot more cinematic than Assassin's Creed has ever been able to capture. Horizon Zero Dawn definitely hits you with that emotion out of the gate. I'm not sure what it is, but they pan around a lot of very big landscapes, they do a lot of interesting camera work, and they also have a very good transition at the end of the tutorial to get you into your adult form. It's all very, very deliberate and well done. The story is very heavy-handed. You are Aloy, and you are with this outcast of the Nora settlement. He kind of teaches you the ways to be, how to grow up in this hunter-gatherer lifestyle, and even though you're rejected from the clan, you do eventually face them in your coming-of-age trial. You can become a brave, earn your place back in the tribe, and thus your story begins. This one is a lot more cinematic, like I said, than Assassin's Creed has ever achieved. There's a way of emotion that's conveyed throughout the cutscenes in this game that is very hard to compare to another game.
I'm here, and wherever you go, I will follow.
But before I get too ahead of myself, let's talk about a little bit of the environments. There is a huge, vast difference between going through this kind of lonely winter wonderland and then contrasting that to Meridian, a bustling and hustling city full of people. And there's a lot of politics at play, a lot of side quests you find along the way that introduce you to these characters that become a lot more fleshed out as you play. A lot of these side quests actually have a lot more interest to me than the main quest, because they go about telling the story in a different way. You learn off of these characters, it's more of an organic interaction, and I find that some of my opinions of these characters actually changed as I go throughout their story. And interestingly enough, at the end of the story, usually, there is an element of choice. You can respond to these characters and their situations with disgust, with an aggressive tone, or you can have the intelligent answer that kind of plays the middle ground, or you can hit them with an emotional response. Each of these are different to the situation, but it really kind of gives you, some agency in this world that's big without you. Now, the world is big and storied, and there's a lot of interesting things that could lead you off of the path. And maybe that's the first issue I have, is that when you're exploring in this big, wide open world, it's pretty easy to get kind of lost and to find yourself in front of a lot of enemies that may be higher level than you. They slap you back into reality, oftentimes one-shotting you, or just moving in a pattern that you've never seen before, so it's very hard to adapt. That brings me to the combat of this game. It's very light on the melee. Personally, that is. I'm sure there are ways to build your character or to kind of, emphasize the melee dodge combat, but your character carries up to 4 different projectile weapons. So that definitely at least to me, made me slanted as a projectile using character. There's a lot of different environmental, or elemental I should say, abilities to bring to the field, where you're throwing fire or you're shooting ice around to freeze or damage the enemy robots in ways that will speed up their destruction. It's more of a strategic game that way, where you're using your ammunition instead of your face to deal with a lot of the enemy types, because you are pretty squishy in this game. Now, when it comes to the combat controls, I have to say that I really enjoy the flexibility with this. There is controller support. I could have committed heresy and used an Xbox controller on this Sony Interactive game, but I opted for the keyboard approach. Getting into PC gaming, I like to sharpen those PC skills, and at least this allows you to change the keyboard mapping however you see fit. I found their defaults to be kind of a little weird, but I was able to tailor different moves to my mouse buttons per se, and that gave me a lot of, again, agency over how I want to play. It changed my game type, and I was able to keep up with the difficulty of the enemies that way. Those snapshots feel really good out of the mouse, and the control scheme supports it with the dodge roll and the crouch. You're able to put those on the mouse buttons as well. But if you are facing difficulty with the combat, there is a progression system. I mentioned these bustling cities earlier. If you go to one of those, you're able to visit the merchants and acquire different weapon sets, higher level weapons, all the way from green, blue to purple. And the purples you are able to modify with these, tokens that you find on enemies in combat. There's kind of a random roll effect where you find the loot, and that loot could be an addition to fire damage that you do. You slap that on a weapon, now that weapon's way more effective as fire damage. This again gives you the ability to kind of spec your character, because the character specking is actually pretty light. Aside from the equipment, you're really only upgrading your satchels, your carrying capacity, and you're doing that with the hunting of wild animals. There is actually a few living creatures around the world, and you are a bow hunter by trade, so if you hunt these down, if you spend some time doing that, you will increase your carrying capacity. That way you're a little bit more effective in combat. But other than that, your character is growing through a level progression system, and I think that's supposed to terminate around level 30 for the main story, but with the Frozen Wilds, it goes to 40 plus, 45 potentially by the end of that scenario. So your character gets these skill points associated with each level that you are able to put into a skill tree, and that skill tree is mostly populated with abilities, not so much stats. So you're not really able to tweak your melee damage output. You are able to add more of a armor clearing ability to your weapon, so you can attack and knock armor off via the skill tree, but the skill tree is more populated with things that you can improve upon, such as like harvesting natural resources. Stealth mechanics get added with the use of this skill tree, and that's kind of the main way of growing your character from early game to end game. Speaking of endgame, the story feels to me like it wraps up pretty quickly. I have to say that it feels like there was a lot more put into the side stories, the side characters that you meet and interact with, as opposed to the mainline story. I find with the mainline kind of events, you're learning through the use of your scanner, you're picking up collectibles to tell the backstory. I enjoy those elements, but what I don't enjoy is the kind of cutscene, cinematic, heavy exposition, very dialogue heavy events towards the end of the game. They kind of fill you in on the events of the world, in my opinion, kind of rushed, as opposed to the way the side characters worked their story out. This was a little less organic, and I feel like they maybe just kind of slapped the end together, expecting you to kind of be a little bit bored of the storytelling arc by then. But that being said, if you do rush through this game, you are able to blast right through it, and you want to do another playthrough, they do have New Game Plus. that adds a lot of replayability to this game. Good on them for adding New Game Plus. I'm always a fan of seeing that, especially in an exploration game where you're either one of two players. You either grab everything you can, you move like a honeybee through the map and you complete the whole thing in one shot, or you blast through the story mode, maybe you didn't get everything you wanted to, so you're able to jump back in and play all over again with more difficulty, all the equipment that you ended with, and all the skill points that you ended with. That's always a positive here. This is a little bit of my take on Horizon Zero Dawn, repacked on the PC for me, specifically as an outsider, to jump into finally for the first time. I have to say that this game pretty much blew me away in every category, and as such, I have to give this one a 9 out of 10. I wish somebody told me about this game earlier. Horizon Zero Dawn is an awesome cinematic and emotional experience from start to finish. A great start to a brand new series.